The metal gate slammed shut with a thunderous clang that echoed across the entire subdivision. Corinne Thompson stood frozen on the wrong side of the barrier, her face twisted in disbelief as she stared at the freshly installed lock that now separated her from her own driveway. "You cannot do this to me," she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "This is illegal. I will sue you for everything you have." I stood calmly on my side of the gate, holding the legal documents that had taken months to prepare. The same woman who had tried to destroy my life over a simple for sale sign now found herself completely at my mercy. "Actually, Corinne," I said, my voice steady and measured, "I can do exactly this. You see, you are standing on my property now." That was the moment Corinne Thompson realized she had picked a fight with the wrong person. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where it all began. 3 generations of my family had called this place home. The ranch stretched across 42 acres of rolling hills and ancient oak trees, with a crystal-clear lake that reflected the Texas sky like a mirror. My grandfather built the original cabin in 1952, and my father expanded it into the sprawling ranch house where I now lived. Every morning for the past 15 years, I would walk down to the lake with my coffee and watch the sun rise over the water. The bass would jump, creating ripples that caught the golden light. Deer would come to drink at the far shore, and occasionally a great blue heron would stand motionless in the shallows, hunting for fish. This was not just property to me. This was sacred ground. Every tree held memories. The rope swing my father hung when I was 10 still dangled from the massive oak by the dock. The fire pit where we roasted marshmallows during family reunions was still surrounded by the same weathered log benches my grandfather had carved by hand. But life has a way of forcing impossible choices. The medical bills from my mother's cancer treatment had drained our savings. The ranch required constant maintenance that I could no longer afford. The property taxes had tripled in the last decade as development crept closer to our slice of paradise. I spent sleepless nights staring at bank statements and medical bills, trying to find another way. I applied for loans, considered taking on partners, even looked into selling just portions of the land. Nothing worked. The numbers were brutal and unforgiving. The decision to sell tore my heart in half, but keeping the ranch would mean losing everything anyway when the bank foreclosed. At least this way, I could choose who would become the next caretaker of this special place. I drove to the hardware store and bought a simple wooden sign, "For sale by owner," in bold black letters. My hands shook as I hammered the metal posts into the ground beside the lake. Each strike of the hammer felt like a nail in a coffin. The sign looked so small and insignificant against the vastness of the landscape, but I knew it represented the end of an era. I sat on the dock for an hour after installing it, just listening to the water lap against the wooden planks. That evening, I called my sister in California to tell her what I had done. We both cried on the phone. She understood there was no other choice, but that did not make it hurt any less. I had no idea that posting that innocent for sale sign would trigger a war that would consume the next year of my life. I had no idea that the woman living in the subdivision next door was about to make my life a living hell. Corinne Thompson lived in Willow Creek Estates, a cookie-cutter subdivision that had sprouted up 5 years ago on what used to be farmland. The houses were packed together like sardines, each with tiny yards and matching mailboxes. Corinne had recently been elected president of the Homeowners Association, a position she wielded like a weapon. I first saw her the morning after I posted the sign. She was standing at the property line between my ranch and her subdivision, hands on her hips, staring at my for sale sign with obvious displeasure. Karen was a woman in her mid-50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and clothes that screamed expensive. She drove a white BMW SUV and always looked like she was on her way to a country club lunch. Everything about her appearance was calculated to project success and authority. Even from a distance, I could see the anger radiating from her posture. She took out her phone and snapped several photos of my sign and property. Red flags went up in my mind, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid, I was being naive. 3 days later, Corinne Thompson marched across my property line like she owned the place. I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying my morning coffee and watching the lake, when I saw her stomping up the gravel driveway. Her face was set in a mask of righteous indignation. "Excuse me," she called out before she even reached the porch. "We need to talk about that sign." I set down my coffee cup and stood up slowly. "Good morning. Can I help you with something?" "I am Corinne Thompson, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association," she announced, as if the title carried the weight of federal authority. "That for sale sign is completely unacceptable and needs to come down immediately." I blinked at her in confusion. "I am sorry, but I do not understand. This is my property and I have every right to sell it." Corinne's eyes flashed with anger. "Your little ranch is bringing down our property values. Do you have any idea how hard we have worked to maintain the character and prestige of this neighborhood? One look at your shabby little sign and potential buyers will think twice about investing in Willow Creek Estates." The insult to my family's land hit me like a slap. My voice remained calm, but inside I was seething. "Ma'am, this ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. I am selling it because I have to, not because I want to. And frankly, what I do with my own property is none of your business." "Everything that affects property values is my business," Corinne shot back. "I did not spend 2 years climbing to the top of this HOA just to watch some country bumpkin destroy everything we have built." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my house, my truck, even my coffee cup. The violation of privacy was stunning. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Documenting everything," she said with a cruel smile. "The peeling paint on your shutters, the rust on that old truck, the general state of disrepair. The HOA board is going to hear about this, and we will find a way to make you remove that sign." "You have no authority over my property," I said firmly. "Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. I am not a member and I never will be." Corinne's face turned red. "We will see about that. I know people at the county planning office. I know city council members. I know lawyers who specialize in property disputes. If you think you can just ignore the impact your actions have on this community, you are sadly mistaken." She waved her phone in the air. "I am going to make sure everyone knows what kind of neighbor you really are. Selfish, inconsiderate, and completely indifferent to the harm you are causing to hardworking families who depend on their home values for their retirement security." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Here was a woman who lived in a house built on former farmland, lecturing me about respecting the character of the neighborhood. "Ma'am, I think you need to leave my property now," I said, my patience finally running out. "Oh, I will leave," Corinne said, backing toward her car. "But this is not over, not by a long shot. You have no idea who you are dealing with." She paused at her car door and turned back to face me. "That sale is never going to happen. I will make sure of it. And when the dust settles, you will wish you had just taken down that sign when I asked nicely." As she drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something in her voice, in the way her eyes had narrowed when she made that final threat, told me this woman was dangerous. I had dealt with difficult people before, but Corinne Thompson was different. She had the resources, the connections, and most importantly, the vindictive personality to turn my life upside down. I was about to learn just how far she was willing to go. 2 weeks later, I was working in my garage when I heard the crunch of gravel under heavy tires. I looked up to see two police cruisers pulling into my driveway. My heart immediately started pounding. You never expect to see law enforcement at your door unless something is seriously wrong. Officer Martinez stepped out of the first car, a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. His partner, Officer Johnson, was younger and more serious-looking. Both approached with their hands resting casually on their duty belts. "Good afternoon, sir," Officer Martinez said. "We received a complaint about possible zoning violations on this property. Mind if we ask you a few questions?" My mouth went dry. Zoning violations? What kind of violations? "The complaint alleges you are operating an unlicensed commercial business from a residential property," Officer Johnson read from his notepad. "Specifically, some kind of event venue or wedding facility using the lake area." The absurdity of the accusation was stunning. "Officers, I think there has been a serious misunderstanding. This is just my family home. I am not running any kind of business here." Officer Martinez nodded. "That is what we figured, but we have to follow up on all complaints. Would you mind showing us around so we can close this out?" I led them on a tour of the property, explaining the history of the ranch and my family's connection to the land. They saw the fishing dock, the old rope swing, the fire pit where we had family gatherings. Everything screamed private residence, not commercial venue. "Sir, can I ask who filed this complaint?" I said as we walked back toward their cars. The officers exchanged glances. "We cannot reveal that information, but between you and me," Officer Martinez said quietly, "someone really wanted us to believe you were running a business here. They provided photos, claimed to have witnessed large events, even suggested you were advertising online." "All completely false," I said. "We figured as much," Officer Johnson said. "Your neighbor seems to have an active imagination." Before I could respond, we heard the sound of another car pulling up. My heart sank as I recognized the white BMW. Corinne Thompson stepped out, clearly expecting to find me in handcuffs. "Officers," she called out, hurrying over with a smug expression. "Thank goodness you are here. I hope you found evidence of the illegal activities I reported." Officer Martinez turned to face her, his expression professional but cold. "Ma'am, we have completed our investigation. There are no zoning violations on this property." Corinne's face fell. "But what about the commercial fishing operation, the wedding receptions by the lake, the parking violations from all the customers?" "Ma'am, this is a private residence," Officer Johnson said firmly. "There is no evidence of any commercial activity. Filing false reports is a serious matter." The color drained from Corinne's face. "False reports? I never filed a false report. There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Officer Martinez said. "We have thoroughly investigated your claims, and they are completely without merit. In the future, please be absolutely certain of your facts before involving law enforcement." Corinne's shock quickly transformed into rage. "This is ridiculous. You people are not doing your jobs. I am a taxpayer in this community, and I demand proper investigation of clear violations." Her voice rose to a shriek that echoed across the lake. Several neighbors from the subdivision had wandered over to see what was happening, drawn by the police cars and commotion. "Ma'am, please lower your voice," Officer Johnson said. "We have done our job thoroughly and professionally. This gentleman is in violation of no laws or ordinances." "You are all incompetent," Karen screamed, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. "I will be calling your supervisor. I will be calling the mayor. This is completely unacceptable." The watching neighbors began whispering among themselves. Some pulled out phones to record Karen's meltdown. The woman who always presented herself as the dignified leader of their community was coming apart at the seams in front of everyone. Officer Martinez handed me his card. "Sir, if you have any more problems with false complaints, please give us a call. And ma'am," he turned to Karen, "I suggest you think very carefully before filing any more reports about this property." As the police cars pulled away, Karen stood in my driveway trembling with rage and humiliation. The neighbors continued to stare and whisper. Her perfect reputation had just taken a devastating blow. "This is not over," she hissed at me before storming back to her car. But I could see in her eyes that something had changed. The confident, threatening woman from 2 weeks ago had been replaced by someone desperate and cornered. And desperate people, I was about to learn, are capable of anything. Within a week of the police incident, something unexpected happened. My phone rang with an offer that seemed too good to be true. "Mr. Peterson," the voice was professional, businesslike. "My name is David Chen. I represent a client who is interested in purchasing your property. We are prepared to make a cash offer at full asking price." I almost dropped the phone. After all the drama with Karen, I had not received a single legitimate inquiry about the ranch. Full asking price, no negotiations. "That is correct. My client has very specific requirements and believes your property meets their needs perfectly. However, they insist on complete anonymity throughout the transaction. All communications will go through my law firm." Red flags immediately went up. "Why the secrecy? Who is your client?" "I cannot disclose that information," Mr. Chen said smoothly. "What I can tell you is that they are financially qualified, serious about the purchase, and willing to close within 30 days. Are you interested?" The offer was exactly what I needed to solve my financial problems, but the mysterious nature of the buyer made me nervous. Still, I could not afford to turn down a legitimate cash offer. "What are the terms?" I asked. "Standard purchase agreement, but with a few unusual requests. My client wants to maintain the property exactly as it is. No changes to structures, landscaping, or lake access. They also want detailed maps of all property boundaries and any existing easements or rights of way." The requests were odd but not alarming. "When can we start the paperwork?" "I will messenger the contracts to you tomorrow morning." Word of the cash offer spread quickly through the area. Within days, Karen Thompson had transformed from a woman humiliated by the police to a woman possessed by curiosity and suspicion. She started showing up at the real estate office, demanding information about the buyer. When they refused to tell her anything, she began harassing the title company, the bank, even the messenger service delivering documents. "There is something fishy about this whole transaction," she announced at an emergency HOA meeting she called to discuss the situation. "Anonymous buyers, cash deals, lawyer intermediaries. This has all the hallmarks of money laundering or criminal activity." The neighbors who had witnessed her public meltdown were less receptive to her conspiracy theories than they once might have been. But Karen's obsession with the mysterious buyer continued to grow. She began driving past my property multiple times per day, taking photos of any vehicles she did not recognize. She interrogated delivery drivers, questioned contractors, and even followed the messenger who brought legal documents. Her behavior became so erratic that Mr. Chen called to express concern. My client is aware of the surveillance activities of your neighbor. They want to proceed with the sale, but they are concerned about future harassment. Karen Thompson has no legal standing to interfere with this transaction, I assured him. She is just angry that her attempt to sabotage the sale backfired. But Karen was not finished trying to sabotage things. She started a whisper campaign throughout both our communities, spreading rumors about suspicious buyers and questionable money. She printed flyers warning neighbors to be alert for criminal activity and property value threats. The harassment extended to me personally. I began receiving angry calls from HOA members who had been influenced by Karen's propaganda. They accused me of being part of some scheme to destroy the neighborhood and demanded I reveal the buyer's identity. "You are bringing dangerous elements into our community," one caller screamed. "We have children here. We have the right to know who is moving in next door." The irony was bitter. Karen had started by claiming my for sale sign would hurt property values. Now she was actively spreading fear and paranoia that was actually damaging the community's reputation. But her investigation efforts were having an unexpected result. The more desperately she tried to uncover the buyer's identity, the more sophisticated their privacy measures became. Additional layers of legal protection were added. Corporate entities were established. Even more lawyers became involved. "Your neighbor has quite a talent for making simple things complicated," Mr. Chen observed during one of our phone calls. "My client appreciates thorough privacy protection, but this is becoming excessive even by their standards." The closing date approached despite Karen's best efforts to derail the process. She had exhausted every legal avenue to force disclosure of the buyer's identity. She had badgered every professional involved in the transaction. She had even tried to get the county to investigate the sale for potential fraud. Nothing worked. The sale moved forward with clockwork precision, protected by layers of legal expertise that seemed to anticipate and counter every move Karen made. The night before closing, I sat on my dock one last time as the owner of the family ranch. Tomorrow, the property would belong to someone I had never met, someone whose identity remained a complete mystery. But as I watched the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson, I felt strangely at peace. Whatever happened next, at least Karen Thompson had failed to destroy the sale through her vindictive interference. I had no idea that the biggest surprise was yet to come. The closing took place at the law offices of Chen, Williams and Associates in downtown Austin. I had expected to finally meet the mysterious buyer, but Mr. Chen explained that his client would not be attending in person. "They have granted me full power of attorney to complete this transaction," he said, sliding documents across the mahogany conference table. "Everything has been prepared for your signature." I signed page after page of legal documents, each one transferring ownership of my family's legacy to someone whose identity remained unknown. The cashier's check for the full purchase amount felt surreal in my hands. "When will I meet the new owner?" I asked as we finished the paperwork. Mr. Chen smiled mysteriously. "Actually, they asked me to arrange a meeting with you this afternoon. There are some things they would like to discuss about the property's future." 2 hours later, I sat in the same conference room, nervously waiting to meet the person who now owned my family's ranch. The door opened, and my jaw dropped in complete shock. "Hello, brother," my sister Sarah said. walking into the room with a smile that was both mischievous and emotional. I stared at her in stunned silence. Sarah lived in California, worked as a software engineer, and had never shown any interest in moving back to Texas. What? How? Why did you not tell me? She sat down across from me, her eyes beginning to tear up. Because you never would have accepted help if you knew it came from me. You are too proud, too protective of everyone else. You would have found another way, even if it meant losing everything. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You bought the ranch. With what money? Remember that little startup I joined 5 years ago, the one you said would never amount to anything? Sarah laughed through her tears. We went public last year. Suddenly, I had more money than I knew what to do with. I shook my head in disbelief. But the anonymity, the lawyers, all the secrecy. That was my idea, she said. I knew you would refuse charity from your little sister, but I also knew you would sell to a legitimate buyer, so I became a legitimate buyer. The emotional weight of her sacrifice overwhelmed me. Sarah, you spent your fortune on our family land. I invested in my family's happiness, she corrected. This place means everything to you. It means everything to me too, even though I do not live here. Some things are more important than money. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. There are some additional documents you both need to review. The property transfer includes specific provisions for your continued residence and use of the land. Sarah pushed a folder toward me. You are not losing the ranch, David. You are keeping it in the family where it belongs. I want you to live here as long as you want. Take care of it like you always have. And when you are ready, when your finances are stable again, you can buy it back from me at the same price I paid. I could not speak. The roller coaster of emotions from the past months, the heartbreak of selling, the harassment from Corinne, the stress of the mysterious buyer, all of it dissolved into overwhelming gratitude and relief. There is one more thing, Sarah said with a wicked grin. I heard about your neighbor problems from the lawyers. Apparently, Mrs. Thompson has been quite persistent in her attempts to uncover my identity. Mr. Chen chuckled. Your sister has been monitoring the situation closely. We have documented every instance of harassment, every false complaint, every attempt to interfere with the legal sale of private property. She has no idea who she has been dealing with, Sarah said, but that might change very soon. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Corinne Thompson's number. I looked at Sarah, who nodded for me to answer. Hello, Corinne, I said, putting the phone on speaker. I know you are hiding something. Corinne's voice was shrill with frustration. That sale was suspicious from day one. I demand to know who bought that property. Actually, Corinne, I said, looking at my sister, I think it is time you learn the truth. Would you like to meet the new owner? There was a long pause. You mean they are willing to identify themselves? Oh yes, Sarah said, leaning toward the phone. We are very willing to have that conversation. In fact, I think it is long overdue. The satisfaction in Sarah's voice sent a chill down my spine. I suddenly realized that my sister had not just bought the ranch to save it. She had bought it with full knowledge of Corinne's harassment campaign. And now she was ready to do something about it. The next morning, Sarah and I sat in my kitchen with her laptop open, property records and legal documents spread across the table like battle plans. My sister had always been the strategic thinker in our family, but seeing her in action was truly impressive. Show me everything, she said, pulling up county property databases. Every interaction with Corinne Thompson, every threat, every attempt at interference. I want to understand exactly what we are dealing with. I recounted the entire saga, From Karen's first trespassing incident to the false police report to her ongoing harassment campaign. Sarah took notes, occasionally asking pointed questions about dates, witnesses, and documentation. She made a critical error when she started investigating my purchase, Sarah said, typing rapidly. All of her inquiries are documented. The harassment of real estate professionals, the intimidation tactics, the false complaints to county offices. We have evidence of everything. She pulled up an aerial view of the subdivision on her screen. Now let me show you something interesting about your neighbor's property situation. The satellite image clearly showed Willow Creek estates as a cluster of houses surrounded by undeveloped land. Sarah zoomed in on the area where the subdivision connected to the main county road. Do you see this narrow strip of land here? She pointed to a thin corridor that connected the subdivision to Highway 35. That is the only practical access road to Karen's precious community, and according to property records, it is not owned by the HOA. My pulse quickened as I understood the implications. Who owns it? Sarah smiled grimly. A development company that went bankrupt 2 years ago. The property has been tied up in legal proceedings ever since. But here is the interesting part. It goes up for auction next month. She pulled up another document. And here is the really interesting part. Your friend Karen has been having some financial difficulties of her own. Apparently, her husband's contracting business took a major hit during the recession. They have been struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments. How do you know all this? Public records are amazing things when you know how to search them, Sarah said. Court filings, tax liens, bankruptcy documents. It is all there if you know where to look. She continued typing, pulling up more information. Karen's aggressive HOA presidency has also generated quite a few legal bills. Apparently, she has been sued 3 times in the past year by homeowners who challenged her authority. The legal fees have been substantial. The picture was becoming clear. Karen's vindictive campaign against me was not just personal, it was financially motivated. She was desperate to protect property values because her own financial survival depended on it. So what are you thinking? I asked. Sarah turned the laptop toward me, showing a complex corporate structure diagram. I am thinking we can solve multiple problems with one strategic purchase. That access road property is valued at about $200,000. For someone with my resources, that is a rounding error. My heart started racing. You want to buy the access road. I want to control it, Sarah corrected. There is a difference. The property includes an easement that has been assumed to grant unlimited access to the subdivision, but easements can be modified, restricted, or revoked under certain circumstances. She pulled up another document. Like when the easement holder engages in harassment of the property owner, files false police reports, or attempts to interfere with legal property transactions. The elegance of the strategy was breathtaking. Corinne had spent months trying to sabotage my property sale. Now her own access to her property could be controlled by the very person she had tried to destroy. This is not just about revenge, Sarah continued. This is about justice. Corinne Thompson needs to learn that her actions have consequences. She cannot terrorize her neighbors and expect no repercussions. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah put her plan into motion with military precision. She established another anonymous corporate entity to bid on the access road property. She hired additional lawyers specializing in easement law. She documented every instance of Corinne's ongoing harassment. Meanwhile, Corinne remained completely oblivious to the approaching storm. She continued her surveillance of my property, still trying to uncover the identity of the mysterious buyer. She had no idea that her own property's vulnerability was being methodically exploited. The auction took place on a rainy Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. Sarah attended in person, dressed in a conservative business suit and carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. She bid against two other parties and won the property for $180,000. Phase 1 complete, she texted me from the courthouse steps. Phase 2 involved the legal research to support our position. Sarah's lawyers spent days reviewing property records, examining the original easement agreements, and documenting Corinne's pattern of harassment and interference. The easement was granted for reasonable residential access, the lead attorney explained during a conference call. But it was never intended to protect someone who uses that access to launch campaigns of harassment against neighboring property owners. What does that mean legally? I asked. It means we have grounds to restrict or modify the easement based on the holder's conduct, he said, especially given the documented pattern of trespassing, false police reports, and attempted interference with legal property transactions. Sarah smiled with satisfaction. How long will it take to implement the restrictions? We can file the paperwork tomorrow and have the physical barriers installed by the end of the week. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Corinne Thompson had declared war on my family over a simple for sale sign. Now she was about to discover that some wars have consequences she never imagined. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. Friday morning arrived with crystal clear skies and perfect weather for what Sarah had dubbed Operation Justice Day. She had hired a professional fencing company to install the barriers, and they arrived at dawn with trucks full of materials. I watched from my kitchen window as they worked with impressive efficiency. Heavy metal posts were driven into the ground. Chain-link fencing was unrolled and attached. Professional-grade locks were installed on the access gates. By noon, the entire access road to Willow Creek Estates was sealed off with a barrier that looked both legal and permanent. Signs were posted explaining that the road was now private property and access was by permission only. Sarah stood beside me as we admired their work. "Now we wait," she said. We did not have to wait long. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I could hear Corinne's panicked voice the moment I answered. "What did you do?" she screamed without any greeting. "Why is there a fence blocking our road? This is illegal. You cannot block public access." "Hello, Corinne," I said calmly. "I think you might have the wrong number. I do not own any roads." "Do not play games with me," she shrieked. "I know this is your doing. I know you are behind this somehow." "Actually," Sarah said, taking the phone from me, "you should be talking to me. I am the new owner of that access road." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. When Corinne finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah Peterson," my sister said with ice-cold professionalism. "I am David's sister, and I am the anonymous buyer you have been so desperately trying to identify." Another long silence. Then Corinne exploded. "You cannot do this to us. We have rights. We have easements. This is our only way home." "Actually, you had easements," Sarah corrected. "Past tense. Your continued harassment of my brother, your false police reports, and your attempts to interfere with legal property transactions have voided those rights." "That is impossible. You cannot just revoke access to an entire neighborhood." Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm. "I can, I have, and I will continue to do so until you make this right. My lawyers have prepared a very simple resolution to this situation. What do you want? Karen's voice was now pleading rather than demanding. First, you will issue a written apology to my brother for your harassment, trespassing, and false accusations. Second, you will resign from your position as HOA president. Third, you will pay for all legal fees incurred as a result of your actions. And if I refuse, then you can find another way to reach your house, Sarah said. Maybe the fire department will let you use their ladder truck to climb over the back fence. Karen began sobbing on the phone. The complete reversal from threatening aggressor to helpless victim was startling to witness. Please, she begged. I have children, I have a family. You cannot leave us stranded. You should have thought about your family before you declared war on mine, Sarah replied. But I am not unreasonable. Meet us at the gate in 1 hour with the written apology, and we can discuss reasonable access arrangements. Exactly 1 hour later, Corinne Thompson stood at the locked gate with a handwritten letter and tears streaming down her face. She had aged 10 years in the past few hours. The confident, threatening woman who had trespassed on my property months ago was gone, replaced by someone broken and desperate. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered to witness the confrontation. Word had spread quickly through the subdivision about the blocked access and the dramatic reversal of power. Read it out loud, Sarah instructed, pointing to the letter. Karen's voice shook as she read her apology. She admitted to harassment, acknowledged her inappropriate behavior, and promised to never interfere with our property again. With each word, her humiliation became more complete. Now resign from the HOA, Sarah said. Karen pulled out her phone and called the vice president of the Homeowners Association. In front of everyone, she announced her immediate resignation from all positions and responsibilities. The watching neighbors murmured among themselves. Many seemed relieved to see Karen's reign of terror finally ended. The legal fees, Sarah prompted. Karen handed over a cashier's check for $15,000 to cover our attorney costs. Sarah walked to the gate and unlocked it with theatrical flair. You now have access to your home, she announced. But understand that this is private property. Any future harassment of my brother or interference with our legal activities will result in permanent closure of this access. As Karen drove through the gate with tears still streaming down her face, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The satisfaction of justice was overwhelming, but there was also a trace of sympathy for someone whose own actions had led to such complete downfall. Do you think we were too harsh? I asked Sarah as the crowd dispersed. She shook her head firmly. David, that woman tried to destroy your life over a property sale sign. She filed false police reports, harassed real estate professionals, and terrorized you for months. Actions have consequences. The next morning, I walked down to the lake with my coffee as I had done for years. But now there was a profound difference. The property was safe, protected by legal structures that Karen could never threaten again. My sister had not just saved our family land, she had made it stronger than ever. Karen Thompson learned that day that some battles are not worth fighting. Sometimes the person you choose to attack has resources, intelligence, and determination that far exceed your own. Sometimes the underdog wins. And sometimes justice is not just served, it is served with perfect, poetic precision.